Dean never planned on becoming friends with Lucas. That's probably the first thing you need to understand. If you had asked me during freshman year what kind of person Lucas Carter was, I would have said, loud, annoyingly attractive, impossible to miss, and absolutely not my type. He was one of those guys who somehow knew everyone in the dorm by the second week of classes. The kind who walked through the hallway slapping people on the shoulder like he'd known them his whole life. Meanwhile, I was the opposite. I kept to myself. Film major. Mostly stayed in my room editing projects or pretending to study while rewatching the same comfort shows over and over. I wasn't antisocial exactly. I just liked quiet. Which is why getting paired with Lucas in sophomore year housing felt like a punishment from the universe. The room itself was tiny. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window overlooking the parking lot behind the dorm building. The second I walked in with my boxes, Lucas was already there, sitting cross-legged on his bed, arguing with someone on FaceTime while eating dry cereal out of the box. He looked up when I entered. "Oh, damn," he said, grinning immediately. "You're Dean?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah." "No way. Dude, you're like intimidatingly organized." I looked down at the labeled storage bins in my hands. "You can tell that from boxes?" "You used labels," he said seriously. "That's terrifying behavior." I should have been annoyed. Instead, I laughed. That was the problem with Lucas. He made things easy before you realized he'd done it. Within a week, he knew my coffee order, my class schedule, and the fact that I couldn't sleep without some kind of background noise playing. Meanwhile, I learned that Lucas never folded his laundry, survived almost entirely on protein bars, and had nightmares so bad, he sometimes woke up gasping. I only found out about the nightmares because of the first night it happened. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of our door opening. At first, I thought Lucas was coming back from some party. But when I rolled over, I realized he was already in the room, standing beside his bed, breathing hard. "You okay?" I mumbled sleepily. Lucas flinched like I'd startled him. "Yeah," he said too fast. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." The room was dark except for the blue glow of my laptop screensaver. I could barely make out his face, but something about his voice sounded wrong. "You sure?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "Just a nightmare." I sat up a little. "Bad one." He laughed quietly, embarrassed. "You know those dreams that feel real for like 30 seconds after you wake up?" "Yeah, that." He sat down heavily on his mattress, elbows on his knees, trying to catch his breath. I remember staring at him for a second longer than I should have. Lucas always looked confident during the day, relaxed, like nothing could touch him. Seeing him like this shaken and quiet at 3 in the morning felt strangely intimate. "You want the light on?" I asked. "Nah." Silence settled between us. Then he looked over at me and muttered, "Sorry if I scared you." "You didn't." Another pause. "You can go back to sleep," he said softly. But I didn't, because something about the way he sat there in the dark made my chest ache unexpectedly. And that should have been my warning. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Not every night, just sometimes. I'd wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning and find Lucas sitting awake on his bed, breathing unevenly after another nightmare. Sometimes he'd go get water. Sometimes he'd scroll mindlessly through his phone pretending he was fine. One night, after hearing him wake up again, I finally asked, "Do these happen a lot?" Lucas was quiet for a second. "More lately." "You want to talk about it?" "Nope." He said it lightly. Not rude. Just final. I respected that. At least, I tried to. The weird thing was that Lucas became softer afterward. Not dramatically, just in little ways. He'd save me food without asking. He'd wait for me after class so we could walk back together. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me for a second too long before glancing away. It blurred the lines between roommates and something else I didn't want to examine too closely. Then came the first time he slept in my room. Technically, he already slept in my room. But you know what I mean. It happened during midterms. I was awake late editing a project with headphones on when I noticed movement beside me. Lucas was standing there half asleep, hair messy, oversized hoodie hanging off one shoulder. "You're still up?" he asked quietly. "Deadline tomorrow." He nodded slowly like he was trying to process that information through exhaustion. "You have another nightmare?" I asked. He shrugged. Then he glanced at my bed. "This is going to sound stupid." That sentence alone should have concerned me. "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Can I stay over here for a bit?" I blinked at him. Lucas immediately added, "Not like weird. I don't want to fall back asleep alone right now." My heart did something painfully embarrassing. "Oh," I said intelligently. "Forget it. Bad idea." "No," I said quickly. "It's fine." He looked relieved so fast it physically hurt me. Lucas grabbed his pillow from his bed and dropped down onto the floor beside mine. "You're sleeping on the floor?" I asked. "I'm not stealing your bed, psycho. There's literally space." He looked up at me carefully. "You sure?" I should have said no. Not because I didn't want him there. Because I wanted it too much. Instead, I moved over slightly. Lucas climbed into the bed beside me with surprising hesitation, like he was afraid I'd change my mind halfway through. The second he settled down, the room felt different. Smaller, warmer, dangerous. We didn't touch. That's the part one remember most clearly. There was still space between us, but I could feel his presence anyway. The sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from him under the blanket. After a minute, he whispered, "Thanks." "No problem." Another long silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, Lucas admitted, "It's easier to sleep when you're here." And that sentence followed me for weeks afterward. The next morning should have been awkward. That's what I expected, anyway. I woke up slowly, still half buried in sleep, and immediately became aware of two things at once. First, sunlight was pouring through the blinds directly into my face. Second, Lucas was still beside me. For one horrifying second, my brain completely short-circuited. Then I remembered. Nightmare. Midterms. Lucas asking if he could stay over here. Me making the worst possible decision for my emotional stability. Right. I stayed completely still. Lucas was asleep on his side facing me, one arm tucked under his pillow, breathing slow and even for once. He looked younger asleep. Softer. None of that loud confidence he carried around during the day. And that was dangerous information to have about someone. I carefully grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 9:42 a.m. "Shit," I muttered. Lucas groaned immediately, eyes still closed. "Don't say that word before 10 in the morning. You have class in 20 minutes. That woke him up instantly. His eyes snapped open. "You're lying." "I wish." Lucas sat up so fast, he nearly fell off the bed. "Oh my God." I couldn't stop laughing as he stumbled around the room, trying to find clean clothes. "This is your fault somehow," he informed me while pulling a hoodie over his head. "Interesting theory. You let me sleep. You're an adult." "Debatable." He grabbed his backpack, then suddenly paused near the door. For a second, neither of us said anything. The memory of him sleeping beside me hovered awkwardly in the room now that daylight had exposed it. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. "About last night. Here we go." "You snore," I said immediately. His eyes narrowed. "You're a terrible person. Glad you survived the trauma." A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. And just like that, the tension dissolved. That became our thing after that. Not officially, never discussed directly, which somehow made it feel even more intimate. Whenever Lucas had nightmares, he'd quietly migrate to my side of the room. Sometimes he'd ask. Sometimes he'd just stand there half asleep holding his pillow until I sighed and lifted the blanket without a word. And every single time, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Roommates did stuff like this. Probably. Okay, maybe not. But I stopped questioning it because questioning it meant acknowledging how much I started looking forward to those nights. Lucas changed around me too. During the day, he was still himself, loud, funny, constantly surrounded by people. But when it was just us in the dorm room, he became quieter somehow, more careful. One night after classes, we ended up talking until almost 2 in the morning about absolutely nothing important. Childhood stories, bad relationships, music we secretly liked. Lucas was lying on his back across his bed while I sat at my desk pretending to work. "You ever think about dropping out?" he asked randomly. "All the time." "Really?" "Lucas, I'm in film school. Half my assignments are just explaining why a lamp represents emotional isolation." He laughed so hard, he nearly rolled off the mattress. "I'm serious," I continued. "Yesterday, a professor told me my editing choices were emotionally dishonest." "What does that even mean?" "I don't think he knows." Lucas kept laughing, eyes squeezed shut, and I remember staring at him for a second too long again. That was becoming a problem, because somewhere along the way, Lucas had stopped feeling like just my roommate. He started feeling like the center of the room itself. And I think part of me already knew I was screwed. The worst moment came during a party. Not because anything bad happened, because something good did. Our dorm floor was hosting some crowded Halloween thing with terrible music and warm beer. I didn't even want to go, but Lucas guilted me into it. You can't spend every Friday night editing sad little short films. They're character-driven. They're emotionally constipated. Wow. You know I'm right. So I went. About an hour into the party, Lucas disappeared into the kitchen with friends while I stayed near the wall, nursing the same drink for way too long. Then some girls started flirting with me, which normally would have been fine. Except I noticed Lucas watching us from across the room almost immediately. At first, I thought I imagined it. But every time she touched my arm or leaned closer, Lucas got quieter. By the time she asked for my number, he looked actively irritated. Interesting. I turned her down as politely as possible, and the second she walked away, Lucas appeared beside me. You hate parties, he said. I hate this party specifically. He looked weirdly relieved. You could have gone home with her. Could have. Lucas stared at me for a second. Then, before I could process what was happening, he grabbed my wrist lightly and pulled me toward the hallway. Come on. Where are we going? Outside. I can't hear myself think in here. The cold night air hit us immediately once we stepped outside the dorm building. Lucas leaned against the brick wall, exhaling hard. You okay? I asked carefully. Yeah. Lie. I waited. Finally he muttered. You liked her? What? The girl. I blinked at him slowly. I just met her. That's not what I asked. There was something tense in his voice now. Something unfamiliar. You're acting weird, I said quietly. Lucas laughed once under his breath. Yeah, I know. The parking lot lights cast soft shadows across his face. He looked exhausted suddenly. Then he looked directly at me and asked, Do you ever think we're crossing a line? My stomach dropped. Every possible answer tangled together in my throat at once. Lucas watched me carefully, like my response genuinely mattered to him. Sometimes, I admitted. Silence. Cars passed somewhere in the distance. Then Lucas looked down at the ground and muttered, almost to himself. Okay, good, good. Before I could ask what that meant, he pushed himself off the wall. We should go back inside. But things didn't feel the same after that conversation, because now the line existed, and both of us had finally admitted we could see it. After the Halloween party, Lucas stopped sleeping in his own bed completely. Not every night, but enough that I noticed. At first, he still pretended there was a reason. Nightmare again. Storm's loud. Your fan noise helps. But eventually he stopped explaining altogether. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, I'd hear movement across the room. Then Lucas would appear beside my bed with his pillow tucked under one arm and that half-awake expression that somehow made him look unfairly soft. And every single time, I moved over automatically, like my body had learned him before my brain could catch up. That should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, it became normal. Dangerously normal. One night, sometime in November, I woke up because Lucas was talking in his sleep. At first I couldn't make out the words. Just quiet mumbling beside me. Then, don't go. My chest tightened immediately. Lucas shifted beside me, breathing unevenly. Please. I turned toward him carefully. Even in the dark, I could tell he was stuck inside another nightmare. Lucas, I whispered gently. No response. I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds before resting my hand lightly against his shoulder. Hey, wake up. He jerked awake instantly. For one awful second, pure panic flashed across his face like he genuinely didn't know where he was. Then his eyes focused on me, and the panic disappeared so fast it hurt to watch. Oh, he breathed. It's okay. Lucas stared at me silently in the darkness. Then, without really thinking about it, he moved closer. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just enough that his forehead rested briefly against my shoulder while he tried to calm down. My entire body forgot how to function. You're good, I murmured quietly. He nodded once against me. Neither of us acknowledged what position we were in, which was probably for the best, because if I'd thought too hard about it, I might have combusted on the spot. After a minute, Lucas pulled back slightly. Sorry, he whispered. For what? This. His voice sounded embarrassed now, smaller than usual. I frowned. Lucas, you don't have to apologize for nightmares. That's not really what I meant. The room went completely still. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat now. Then what did you mean? I asked carefully. Lucas looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked away first. Nothing, he muttered. Coward. Unfortunately, I was one too. So instead of pushing him, I let the moment disappear. Try sleeping, I said softly. Lucas nodded again. But before he settled back down, his hand brushed lightly against my wrist under the blanket. Accidental. Maybe. Except neither of us moved away afterward. That was the first night we fell asleep touching. Barely. Just his fingers resting against my wrist. Still, it changed everything. After that, being around Lucas started feeling unbearable in this quiet, constant way. Not bad unbearable. Worse. Good unbearable. Like my feelings had gotten too big for the room we lived in. I noticed everything now. The way he always looked for me in crowded places. How his mood shifted depending on mine. How he instinctively sat too close to me whenever we watched movies. And Lucas noticed things about me too. One afternoon, I came back from class completely exhausted after bombing a presentation. Lucas looked up from his desk immediately. What happened? Nothing. That's a lie. I dropped onto my bed dramatically. My professor said my project lacked emotional sincerity. Lucas stared at me for a second. Then he closed his laptop and crossed the room without another word. What are you doing? I asked. Emergency roommate procedure. Before I could react, he threw himself sideways onto my bed beside me hard enough to make the mattress bounce. I laughed despite myself. You're so annoying. And yet your mood improved instantly. Unfortunately true. Lucas grinned proudly before settling onto his back beside me. For a few minutes, we just lay there shoulder to shoulder staring at the ceiling. Comfortable silence. Then he said quietly, "You care too much about what people think." I turned my head toward him slightly. That's rich coming from you. His expression shifted almost immediately. Oops. Lucas stared at the ceiling for a second longer before speaking again. Yeah, he admitted softly. Fair point. There it was again. That weird tension underneath everything between us lately. Like both of us were circling around the same truth without touching it directly. I swallowed carefully. Lucas. What are we doing? The second the question left my mouth, I regretted it. Lucas went completely still beside me. For a moment, I thought he might joke his way out of it like usual. Instead, he asked quietly, "Do you want the honest answer?" My pulse immediately spiked. Yes. He finally turned his head toward me, and the look in his eyes nearly ruined me. Because Lucas looked scared. Not confused. Not casual. Scared. I think about you constantly, he admitted softly. That's probably a bad sign. I stopped breathing altogether. Lucas laughed nervously when I didn't answer right away. See? That reaction alone means I should have kept my mouth shut. No, I said immediately. Too fast. His eyes flicked back to mine. No, he repeated quietly. I sat up abruptly because staying that close to him suddenly felt impossible. I think about you too. Silence. Heavy. Charged. Terrifying. Lucas slowly sat up beside me. Neither of us looked away. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Dean, if I kissed you right now, would you let me? Every coherent thought vanished from my brain instantly. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Lucas was watching me carefully now, like he was prepared for me to panic and ruin everything. Instead, I whispered, "Yeah." And the expression on his face right then was the most vulnerable thing I'd ever seen. Lucas kissed me like he thought I might disappear halfway through it. Slow, careful, almost hesitant at first. And honestly, that made it worse. If he'd kissed me casually, maybe I could have treated it like a mistake afterward. Something impulsive. Something easy to bury. But Lucas kissed me like it mattered. His hand slid carefully against the side of my neck, warm and slightly shaking, and my brain completely stopped functioning. I kissed him back immediately, which apparently surprised him, because Lucas made this soft, startled sound against my mouth before kissing me harder, like something inside him snapped the second he realized I wanted this too. The room felt way too small suddenly. Every feeling I'd been trying to ignore for months crashed into me at once. Lucas. His stupid late-night visits. The way he always looked for me first in crowded rooms. The fact that he slept better beside me. All of it made horrifying sense now. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us moved very far. Lucas was still close enough that I could feel his breathing. Well, he said quietly. I laughed nervously. That's all you have. I had a better speech prepared in my head. What happened to it? You kissed me, and I forgot English. That made me laugh harder than it should have. Lucas smiled immediately at the sound, but his expression softened again almost right away. You okay? He asked quietly. There it was. The thing Lucas always did. Even now, even after kissing me, he was checking for damage first. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Then, after a second. You? His eyes held mine for a long moment. No, he admitted softly. Not even a little. My heart nearly stopped. Lucas rubbed one hand down his face before laughing under his breath. This is so bad. Bad. We live together, Dean. Fair point. We share like 200 square feet. Also true. And I'm pretty sure I've been in love with you for months. Oh, oh. I think my entire body visibly short-circuited because Lucas immediately groaned. Cool, he muttered. Awesome. Great timing. Love accidentally came out. You love me. He looked absolutely horrified now. I was trying to ease into that information eventually. I stared at him. Lucas stared back. Then, somehow, we both started laughing at the exact same time. Not because it was funny exactly, because the tension had gotten too overwhelming to survive quietly anymore. When the laughter faded, neither of us looked away. And that somehow felt even more intimate than the kiss. You really mean that? I asked softly. Lucas' expression changed immediately. Yeah, he said. No hesitation. No joking. Just honest. Something in my chest physically ached hearing it. Because the terrifying thing was, I already knew. I think part of me had known for a while. You don't have to say it back, Lucas added quickly. Seriously, I know this is a lot. Idiot. I reached for his hand before I could overthink it. Lucas immediately went quiet. I love you too, I admitted. And I swear to God I saw his entire face soften at once. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just relief. Pure overwhelming relief. Then Lucas kissed me again. This one felt different. Less hesitant. Less scared. Like we'd finally stopped pretending this thing between us was temporary. Eventually, reality returned in the worst possible way. Specifically, we still have class tomorrow, I mumbled against his shoulder. Lucas groaned dramatically. Don't ruin this. We're still students. Fake news. I laughed quietly. Then a dangerous silence settled over the room. Lucas was still holding my hand. Still sitting way too close. Still looking at me like I was something fragile and important at the same time. What now? I asked honestly. He leaned back slightly against the wall beside my bed. I have no idea. Helpful. I'm serious, he said softly. I've never done this before. Something about the vulnerability in his voice made my chest tighten. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. I know. Lucas looked down at our hands for a second. Then he admitted quietly. I think I've been figuring it out since the first nightmare. That hit me embarrassingly hard. The first one. He nodded slowly. I woke up freaking out, and the first thing I wanted was you. Silence. Then he laughed softly under his breath. That's actually terrifying now that I say it out loud. No, I murmured. Lucas looked back up at me. It's not terrifying. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Lucas asked quietly, Can I stay here tonight? My heart melted instantly. You literally ask me that every night. Yeah, but now it feels different. Because now we knew. I squeezed his hand lightly. Stay. Lucas smiled at me then. Small. Real. Completely unguarded. And honestly, that smile scared me more than anything else had so far. Because it looked like home. Dating Lucas while living in the same dorm room was either the best experience of my life or a complete psychological experiment designed to destroy me. Maybe both. For the first few days, everything felt surreal. Not dramatic. Not wildly different. Just softer. Lucas still stole my charger constantly. Still left hoodies hanging off the desk chair. Still complained every morning like waking up personally offended him. But now he kissed me goodbye before class. Quick. Sleepy. Natural. And every single time, my brain completely rebooted afterward. The weirdest part was how easily we fell into it. Like we'd already been orbiting around being together for months and finally got tired of pretending otherwise. One night we were both studying or pretending to when Lucas suddenly looked up from his laptop and said, You know what's messed up? What? I used to think you hated me. I stared at him. Lucas, you talked to me for 40 straight minutes on move-in day. Yeah, but you had that face. What face? That face. He pointed vaguely at me. The emotionally unavailable film student face. That's not a thing. It absolutely is. I laughed quietly while Lucas grinned at me like he'd won something. Then his expression softened. You were worth annoying, though. That stupid sentence made my chest ache immediately. Because Lucas said things like that casually sometimes. Like affection slipped out of him before he could stop it. I was becoming dangerously addicted to it. The problem was that being around him now felt almost too intense. We still shared the same tiny room. Still slept inches apart every night. Except now there was no pretending our feelings were accidental anymore. Which meant every little thing mattered. One evening, I came back from the library exhausted and found Lucas asleep in my bed waiting for me. Not unusual anymore. What destroyed me was the fact that he'd unconsciously reached across the mattress searching for me, even while asleep. Like his body expected mine there automatically now. I stood in the doorway for a full minute just looking at him. Then Lucas stirred slightly, eyes opening halfway. "There you are," he mumbled sleepily. That sentence genuinely almost killed me. "You're dramatic," I informed him softly. Says the film major. Fair. I changed clothes quietly while Lucas watched me through half-asleep eyes. Then, once I climbed into bed beside him, he immediately moved closer without thinking. Just instinct. His head settled against my shoulder while he drifted back toward sleep. And for one terrifying moment, I wanted this forever. That thought hit me so hard I stopped breathing. Forever. Not college. Not temporary. Not whatever this is. Forever. Lucas noticed immediately. "You okay?" he murmured against my shoulder. I hesitated. Then I admitted quietly. "You scare me sometimes." He lifted his head slightly to look at me. "Why?" "Because I'm falling too hard. Because this already feels too important. Because losing you would wreck me." Instead I said, "Because you matter too much." Lucas stared at me silently for a second. Then his expression changed in this subtle, heartbreaking way. Like he understood exactly what I meant. "Dean," he said softly, "come here. I'm literally already here. You know what I mean." I did. So I turned slightly toward him, and Lucas immediately wrapped both arms around me in the dark like he needed reassurance too. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping softly against the window. Then Lucas admitted something that completely shattered me. "I think I've been lonely for a really long time." I swallowed hard. Lucas rarely talked seriously about himself unless he absolutely had to. "You have like a million friends." "Yeah, that doesn't count." He was quiet for a second. "Not the same way." I understood immediately. Because somehow Lucas had become the only person I never felt lonely around either. Even silence with him felt full. "I didn't realize how bad it was until you," he admitted quietly. My chest physically hurt listening to him talk like this. "I'm glad you found me," I whispered before I could stop myself. Lucas tightened his arms around me slightly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." Then came the moment that changed things again. A week later, someone saw us. Not kissing. Nothing dramatic. But close enough. We'd fallen asleep together after another late night, and apparently neither of us noticed that one of our dorm friends, Mason, opened the door the next morning without knocking. I woke up too. "Oh." Lucas jerked upright instantly beside me. Mason stood frozen in the doorway holding a borrowed hoodie. And unfortunately, Lucas' arm was still very obviously around my waist. Silence. Painful silence. Then Mason slowly lifted the hoodie. "I can come back later." "Please do," Lucas said immediately. The door slammed shut. I stared at Lucas. Lucas stared at the door. Then he dropped backward onto the mattress dramatically. "Well," he muttered into the pillow. "That feels significant." I should have laughed. Instead, my stomach twisted nervously. Because suddenly this wasn't just ours anymore. And for the first time since we got together, I saw uncertainty flicker across Lucas' face again. Mason did come back later. Unfortunately. And he brought tension with him. The second he walked into the dorm room that evening, his eyes flicked between me and Lucas so fast, it was almost impressive. Neither of us knew how to act suddenly. Which was ridiculous because 24 hours earlier, things between us had felt effortless. Now every movement felt overthought. Lucas noticed it too. "You're being weird," he told Mason immediately. Mason blinked. "I'm being weird." "Yes." I walked in on. He gestured vaguely between us. Whatever that was. Lucas crossed his arms. Excellent description. Very detailed. Normally that would have made everyone laugh. This time, nobody did. I sat quietly at my desk pretending to work while anxiety slowly ate through my organs. Because here was the thing. I wasn't ashamed of Lucas. Not even remotely. But our relationship had existed in this protected little bubble inside our dorm room. Quiet. Safe. Private. Now someone else knew. And suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about what happened next. Apparently Lucas was thinking the same thing. That night, after Mason left, the room stayed unusually quiet for a long time. Lucas sat on his bed scrolling aimlessly through his phone while I pretended to edit footage for class. Finally, I asked carefully, "You okay?" Lucas sighed immediately. "Yeah." "Lie." I swiveled my chair toward him slightly. "Lucas." He dropped his phone onto the mattress beside him. "I just hate this feeling." "What feeling?" He looked up at me, frustrated. Like everything changed overnight. My chest tightened a little. Did it? I don't know, he admitted quietly. Silence stretched between us. Then Lucas laughed once under his breath. This is messed up, right? What is? The fact that I care this much. Something about the way he said it hurt unexpectedly. Lucas. No, seriously, he continued, sitting up straighter now. A few months ago, I was literally pretending your bed was safer because of nightmares. That wasn't pretending. I know, he said softly. That's the problem. He looked at me then in that intense, direct way that always made my heartbeat speed up. You became important way too fast. I swallowed hard. Because he had no idea how true that was for me too. Maybe that doesn't have to be a bad thing, I said quietly. Lucas held my gaze for a second longer. Then he asked the question I'd been avoiding asking myself all day. Are you scared people know? The room went completely still. I thought carefully before answering. Not because it's you. His expression softened immediately. But I looked down briefly at my hands. I think I'm scared that if this becomes real outside this room, I hesitated. Then I can actually lose it. Lucas went quiet after that. Completely quiet. Then, after a long moment, he crossed the room toward me slowly. I looked up just in time for him to crouch beside my chair. Hey, he said softly. The concern in his voice almost wrecked me. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. No, he admitted quietly. I can't. That honesty somehow made it worse and better at the same time. Lucas rested his forehead lightly against the side of my arm for a second before continuing. But Dean, I spent months trying not to want this. My heart physically ached hearing that. I tried convincing myself I just liked being around you because you made me feel calm, or because you listened when I talked, or because sleeping beside you stopped the nightmares. He laughed softly under his breath. Turns out those are all terrible reasons to pretend you're not in love with someone. I closed my eyes briefly, because hearing Lucas say love so naturally now still felt unreal. When I looked back down at him, he was already watching me carefully. I don't care who knows, he admitted quietly. I just care if you still want this once they do. God. I slid my hand carefully into his hair before I could overthink it. Lucas immediately melted against me slightly at the touch. I want you, I whispered. The look he gave me after that nearly destroyed my remaining emotional stability. Then, because the universe enjoys ruining moments, someone pounded loudly on our door. Lucas jumped violently. What the hell, he muttered. The door swung open before either of us answered. 3 guys from our floor walked in loudly carrying pizza boxes, and immediately stopped, because Lucas was crouched beside my chair with my hand still very obviously in his hair. Silence. One of the guys blinked slowly. Oh, he said. Lucas stared at him. The guy stared back. Then, wait, he said carefully. Are you two together? I think my soul briefly left my body. Beside me, Lucas went completely still. This was it. The moment. The thing that existed safely inside our room, suddenly standing under fluorescent dorm lighting where everyone could see it. I looked at Lucas instinctively. And the second I did, I realized something terrifying. He looked more scared for me than for himself. Lucas slowly stood up beside me. Then, after the briefest hesitation imaginable, his hand found mine. Warm, steady, certain. Yeah, he said quietly. My heart nearly stopped. Yeah, we are. For about 3 full seconds after Lucas said it, nobody moved. Not me. Not Lucas. Not the guys holding the pizza. The entire room felt frozen in place. Then one of them, Tyler, I think, blinked and went. Huh. That was it. Not disgust. Not shock. Just huh. Another guy lifted the pizza boxes slightly. So are we still eating this, or did we interrupt a life-changing moment? And somehow that broke the tension completely. Lucas laughed first. A short, disbelieving laugh, like his body suddenly remembered how breathing worked again. Then everyone else started talking at once. Dude, why were you acting mysterious? How long has this been happening? Wait, is this why Lucas stopped flirting with literally everyone? Lucas immediately pointed at him. That last comment feels aggressive. I sat there stunned while the room returned to normal around me embarrassingly fast. Because apparently the apocalypse I'd imagined in my head wasn't happening. At some point, Tyler tossed Lucas a soda and said, honestly, this makes way more sense than you two just being freakishly codependent roommates. Lucas looked personally offended. We can be both. That got actual laughter out of me. Lucas glanced toward me immediately at the sound, and the expression on his face softened in that automatic way it always did lately. And suddenly I realized something. He was still holding my hand. In front of everyone. Not hidden behind blankets. Not in the dark. Not accidental. Openly. Warmth spread painfully through my chest. Because Lucas looked nervous, sure. But he didn't let go. Later that night, after everyone finally left, the dorm room felt strangely quiet again. Lucas closed the door behind the last person and immediately leaned back against it dramatically. Well, he announced to the ceiling. I think I blacked out halfway through that. I laughed softly from my bed. Lucas looked over at me then, his expression slowly turning more serious. You okay? There it was again. Always checking. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Then, after a second. You? Lucas thought about it honestly. I think. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I think I expected it to feel worse. Me too. Silence settled softly between us. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. Then Lucas crossed the room and dropped down beside me on the bed. We really did that, huh? Apparently. He looked weirdly amazed by it. I've spent like half my life overthinking everything, he admitted quietly. And then tonight I just told the truth. Lucas nodded. His shoulder pressed lightly against mine. And for the first time since all this started, he looked calm. Actually calm. Not pretending. Not distracted. Not performing confidence. Just calm. You know what's funny? He said after a while. What? I thought the nightmares were the problem. I looked over at him. Lucas smiled faintly without meeting my eyes. But I think they were just the excuse. My chest tightened instantly. Excuse for what? He finally glanced toward me. To be close to you. God. I think that sentence permanently altered my brain chemistry. Lucas noticed my expression immediately and laughed quietly. You look stressed. You say emotionally devastating things way too casually. That's fair. I leaned back against the wall beside my bed while Lucas stretched out next to me. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Lucas asked quietly, Can I tell you something embarrassing? You've literally slept in my bed for months because you missed me unconscious. Great point. He shifted slightly onto his side to face me better. The first night I came over here, he admitted, I wasn't actually planning to sleep. I frowned slightly. What? Lucas looked deeply embarrassed suddenly. I had a nightmare and woke up freaking out, he explained. And all I could think about was whether your light was still on. That hit me right in the chest. So I got up to check, he continued softly. Then you talked to me, and suddenly I didn't want to leave anymore. I stared at him silently. Because that memory lived in my head too. Lucas standing beside his bed at 3 in the morning looking shaken and exhausted while I tried not to stare at him too long. You remember it? He asked quietly. Yeah. Good, he murmured. Me too. Then he smiled a little. And honestly, I think that's when everything got ruined for me. Ruined? You made me feel safe, he said simply. The room went very still. Lucas looked down for a second before laughing softly under his breath. That sounds insanely dramatic. No, I whispered. Because I understood. I understood exactly what he meant. Somewhere along the way, our tiny dorm room had stopped feeling temporary. It became ours. The late-night conversations. The shared blankets. The way Lucas always looked for me first. The way I slept better whenever he was beside me. None of it felt accidental anymore. Lucas reached for my hand again absent-mindedly, fingers intertwining with mine naturally now. Then he asked quietly, You know what scares me most? What? He looked at me carefully before answering. I think I'm gonna love you for a really long time. And honestly, that didn't scare me anymore at all. Winter break almost ruined us. Not in a dramatic cheating scandal way. Nothing like that. It was worse because it was ordinary. Lucas went home for 3 weeks. I stayed on campus working on a film project and pretending I was emotionally stable about it. The first 2 days were fine. Then suddenly everything felt wrong. Our dorm room, without Lucas in it, was unbearable. Too quiet. Too clean. I kept looking up expecting him to walk through the door complaining about cafeteria food or asking where his hoodie went. Instead, there was just silence, which would have been manageable if Lucas wasn't also terrible at being apart from me. The FaceTime started almost immediately. At first, casual, then constant. One night, I answered half asleep at almost 2 in the morning to find Lucas lying in darkness staring at his ceiling. You know normal people text first. I mumbled. You were asleep? It's 2 a.m., right? Forgot time exists. I smiled despite myself. You okay? Lucas was quiet for a second. Then he admitted softly. I miss you. That should not have affected me as badly as it did. Because the thing about Lucas was that he never said things halfway anymore. Not after us. If he missed me, I heard it in his voice immediately. I miss you too, I admitted quietly. Lucas exhaled slowly like he'd been waiting to hear it. Then he shifted slightly in bed and muttered. My nightmares came back. My chest tightened instantly. Bad. He nodded once. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, softly, I sleep worse without you. God. I leaned back against my pillow staring at him through my phone screen, feeling completely wrecked. You know that's unhealthy, right? I murmured. Probably. But weirdly flattering. That finally got a smile out of him. I'm serious, though, Lucas admitted. I didn't realize how much calmer I felt with you there until you weren't. The terrifying thing was that I understood exactly what he meant. Because I wasn't sleeping well either. Not without hearing him moving around the room. Not without his stupid late-night conversations. Not without him beside me. By the time winter break ended, both of us were losing our minds a little. Lucas texted me updates during his drive back to campus like an impatient golden retriever. 2 hours away. Traffic. I bought you coffee, so legally you have to love me forever now. I smiled at my phone like an idiot the entire afternoon waiting for him. Then finally around 6:30 our dorm room door burst open. Lucas walked in carrying bags, immediately dropped them onto the floor, and looked directly at me. There you are. The relief in his voice hit me so hard it hurt. Before I could even stand properly, Lucas crossed the room and wrapped both arms around me tightly. And something inside me settled instantly. Like my body had been waiting for him to come back too. You drove 4 hours, and this is your first priority? I laughed quietly against his shoulder. You're literally my boyfriend. Be serious. I smiled helplessly. God, I loved him. The thought came so naturally now it startled me sometimes. Lucas pulled back just enough to look at me properly. Then he kissed me softly like he'd been thinking about it the entire drive home. I hated sleeping without you, he admitted immediately afterward. You're clingy. You love it. Unfortunately true. The second semester passed terrifyingly fast after that. And somewhere in the middle of it, our relationship stopped feeling fragile. It stopped feeling like something we were trying to protect from the world. It just became our life. People on our dorm floor got used to us. Lucas stopped hesitating before touching my hand in public. I stopped panicking every time someone looked at us too long. And the nightmares? They didn't disappear completely, but they got quieter. One rainy night near the end of the semester, I woke up around 3 in the morning to find Lucas already awake beside me. Old instinct kicked in immediately. You okay? I whispered sleepily. Lucas looked over at me in the dark. Then he smiled softly. Yeah, he said. Actually, yeah. I reached for his hand automatically under the blanket. Lucas intertwined our fingers immediately. After a second, he admitted quietly. I had a nightmare. My chest tightened. You want to talk about it? He shook his head slightly before moving closer against me. No, he murmured. I just wanted to make sure you were here. Silence settled around us. Comfortable. Warm. Safe. Then Lucas laughed softly under his breath. What? You know what's funny? What? The thing that used to scare me most was waking up alone. I looked at him carefully in the darkness. Lucas brushed his thumb lightly across my hand. Now the thing that scares me most, he admitted quietly, is imagining a life where I never walked into your room. And honestly, I think that was the moment I realized we were going to survive college. Maybe more than that. Because our story never really started with the kiss, or the confession, or even the first time he slept beside me. It started the first night Lucas woke up scared and accidentally chose me for comfort, then kept choosing me afterward. Again, and again, and again, until eventually, somewhere between nightmares and late-night conversations and shared blankets in a tiny dorm room, we stopped being two people trying not to cross a line. We became home for each other instead.